This is Eric and Mark in another episode of the Playground Rules podcast. I've been doing a lot of research about adult bullying, and I'm amazed at just how right we are about the playground rules and ethics phenomenon in the workplace. Here are some of the numbers that I found. 2,000 adults were surveyed, and 31% of them admitted to being bullied as adults. 9,000 federal employees were surveyed, and 57% admitted that they had experienced bullying as adults. According to the Workplace Bullying Institute 2021, 30% of Americans suffer abusive conduct at work, 19% witness it, 49% are affected by it, and 66% know about it. To put these statistics into context, when it comes to bullying and other crimes where the victims are left embarrassed and hopeless, a large number of them never come forward. So I will let you decide what the actual percentages are once that has been factored in. You know, bullying is not just throwing sand in somebody's face or taking their lunch money as you pull up mental images. Bullying is also when people take advantage of their position of authority to suppress or oppress others in their group. Anytime an organizational leader steals your peace or an opportunity from you to keep for themselves or give to members of their clique, they are bullying you. As I think about an example that I can give that will best describe how organizational executives use their position, power, and influence over their group to bully those they don't like, a document titled Standard Operating Procedures comes to mind. There are many of you that do not know what Standard Operating Procedures, or SOPs, are under that title, because it is a term largely used in the law enforcement and military field. So I will briefly explain. An SOP is a body of written rules that in large measure governs the interaction between members of an organization. On a side note, as a lawyer, I am not saying that a body of written rules is a bad thing. In fact, written rules are a great thing because they leave the guesswork, or are supposed to anyway, out of what is expected. My point of contention is not with the written rule, but instead with how several adult organizations choose to apply those rules as convenient. You see, what is interesting about the SOP, and where it correlates with a playground and how playgrounds run, is that the rules set forth in this document only apply from top to bottom and not from bottom to top. What this means is that the executive and the clique under their protectorate do not have to follow the rules, but all of the employees do. This allows for employers, i.e. playground executives, if they decide that they don't like somebody in their organization, to find ways to use the rules set forth in the SOP to hold people back. However, when the employees try to use those same rules of the organization to defend themselves against this behavior, those rules are found to be inapplicable by the person in the organization who gets to determine if the allegations stand or not. Because the person in that decisive role is, you guessed it, the playground rules executive, or the designee. As witnesses are called during the so-called investigatory process, members of the clique will obviously be on the playground executive side, and most others will be too afraid to upset the playground executive and will just simply not get involved or deny what they saw and heard. So as we go to the actual playground, we find the same structure exists. The playground bully, that for correlation purposes we refer to as a playground executive that makes the rules, doesn't themselves have to follow the rules. The playground executive on the actual playground gets to pick the teams, decides who can and cannot play, makes the rules, enforces the rules, decides what's out of bounds, and when a point counts. Only those in the clique have a say, and their say is limited because they know if they cross the playground executive, they may be kicked out of the clique, lose their social status, and all the benefits that come with that. What I just described puts the percentages you heard at the beginning of this episode in real context, and should prove once and for all that playground rules and the bullies that come with them exist in adult organizations as well. I will give you a real example so that you can see the percentage rates play out. Remember, 19% of a group witness bullying, 49% are affected by bullying, and 66% know it exists. So in other words, and this is rough math, between 62 to 85% of an organization know about the bullying and don't do anything to help the person getting bullied. My son has been bullied since 3rd grade. The playground executive leaves him out of playground games or gives him the minimal role that nobody else wants. He's told he's not cool enough to hang out with them. Basically, he's not welcome in the clique, and constantly changes the playground rules in a way that will never allow him to fully participate or even be socially accepted by the group as one of them. The playground rules and ethics follow my son off the playground to the halls, bathrooms, and classrooms. As if emotional intimidation and bullying aren't enough, the playground clique also makes constant physical threats. Kevin Ward on TEDx gives a great mental visual in this regard for those of you wondering just how hopeless a bully victim feels. He says, paraphrase, "A bully will treat you horribly and then remind you that there's nothing you can do about it." That is a scary reality, but is overcomable with laser focus and effort. So I told my son we need to start documenting the occurrences so that if the day comes that he has to defend himself, the school will understand he was defending himself and did not start the fight. So here's how complaining about a bully plays out, and why in the statistics mentioned earlier, playground bullies are able to continue their antics sometimes into adult life. So we tell the school administration that my son is being bullied on the playground and its extensions, and they conduct their so-called investigation. They call the playground executive in, and he represents himself as a totally different person. He combs his hair, wears nice clothes and a smile, and he utters the words, "It was just a misunderstanding," or "I was just playing," or "That never happened." So the school administration then asks my son if anybody else in the playground saw the bullying. My son replies, yes, a kid named X and a kid named B saw the whole thing. The issue is that kid X is in the clique, and kid B is not on the bully's radar and wants to keep it that way. So both take the playground executive's side and leave my son out to dry looking foolish and with a dwindling self-esteem and desire to go to school. And what's worse is that the playground executive is left feeling like he's won, which rewards his behavior and leaves him believing that he has done nothing wrong. This playground executive is likely to continue these antics from a position of authority as an adult as long as his conduct is being rewarded.
Yeah, Eric, so there's a lot to consider there. There's a lot in that, in your segment there that you spoke of. Some really good numbers that you've pulled out. It's really interesting to note, how many people, a substantial number of people, have felt like they were, bullied or harassed as, adults in the workplace or, as children on the playground and that kind of thing. It's actually, the percentages are actually even higher than I expected. So you dug that information up and you found some really good data. Now, I guess my first question is this: what kind of sources did you use to locate that data online? Were there's just were they samples of surveys somewhere, or that you found, or is there some kind of official websites that report on this kind of data? Do you recall offhand what you used?
One was a private group that was analyzing data from a city, and the other one was a private group analyzing data from a federal institution.
I see. Okay. And the data set, this is based on people in the U.S. mainly?
Yeah, that's correct. People in the United States.
Got it. Okay. So yeah, I guess, like I said, it's I knew there was a lot of people out there, but I just didn't realize that the percentages would be that high. So it goes to show you how many people are really facing these types of injustices. We're definitely far from being alone with how we feel, what we've experienced, or in your case, what you commented on with your son and what he experienced. Well, the phenomenon or the sub-phenomenon that interests me in this case, to elaborate on further, at least at the moment, is this. So, kind of like in the case in point with your son, you had several people on the playground where he said, you could ask them, they'll be able to tell you what happened and that type of thing, and they seem to support, the bullies more than than your son's side of the story. I wonder how that works, actually. It's kind of like, we talk about, sometimes kids in school are kind of cultish or cliquish, or do you think that maybe the kids that supported this side of the story, or sided with the bullies, did that because they were afraid of harming their own reputation, where they're like, well, if I go ahead and if I, if I side with the victim, then I'm gonna get victimized at some point myself. Like what would you say are the main factors as to why somebody would side with the, with the bullies instead of your son. I know that part of it, I think you alluded to, is the popularity contest, so to speak, that we know exists in school and how important that is. But what other factors are there? Are these people afraid of their own, or are these kids afraid of their own future if they speak up?
Well, what happens is, and it's interesting that you called it a sub-classification within the playground rules phenomenon. The playground rules is not only about the bullies and the bullied. It is also, I guess, in subset about the exclusion that happens for all those that decide to go against that system. And also the gray area that exists because a lot of their conduct is under the radar. The conduct of the bullies is under the radar and not exactly classified in any HR manual or in any student handbook if we're talking about a school. So that's why it's so hard to prove and why bullies are able to say stuff like, I didn't mean it, or it wasn't my intention, or this never happened. And it's very difficult for the witnesses to take part in this, even though they saw and heard the whole thing, because, as you said, it kind of ruins their reputation. And, if they're in the clique, they obviously don't want to fall out of the graces of the playground executive. And if they're not in the clique, but under the radar of the playground executive, they want to keep it that way. So there really is no incentive to tell on the bully or to tell the authorities on anything some person going on. And so, that's really the gist of what's going on. So we would have the umbrella of playground rules and then the subcategory of being excluded from the privileges of being, I guess, in the good graces of the playground executive.
Absolutely. So it seems to me that they feel like if they side with the bully, maybe one of several things is going to happen. If they side with the bully or the bullies, either A, they're going to be, they're going to become part of the cool kid crowd, or if they're already in the cool kid crowd, then they get to maintain that status. Or even if they're not in the cool kid crowd, that perhaps gives them some kind of some level or they feel it gives them some level of immunity from being bullied by those same people or by those same kids.
Yes, and definitely what makes it hard to investigate later on is that there is no cooperation from those that saw or heard the whole thing. And so that kind of gives leeway to the people that are involved in this social transgression, if you will, or social violation, to get the green light to continue on. And as spoken about in an earlier podcast, there's also a social reward because the people that are doing these things are then viewed as cool, and everyone wants to be cool, so they're going to view that as a positive reward for something that they've done, so they're not going to stop.
So what makes me curious is this. I guess you could say, maybe there's some aspects of human nature. We both know that I think that we all know that, being a human being is a very mixed experience. There's highs, there's lows, there's things that we've done, maybe individually which we feel really good about, and things that we've done which we feel in retrospect we handled differently. What is it, with your extensive research that you've done on this, on the factors that support this playground rules phenomenon, what do you think is the main part of the human, I guess you could say, psyche, or part of the human, I guess you could say, hierarchy of needs that makes people act this way? Are they just, is this, and I guess you can't say it applies to everybody, but let's say, for example, with a bully, is it maybe a matter of kids kind of have maybe fragile self-esteem to begin with, they're still trying to figure out their identity, so the main factor becomes social acceptance, and then maybe with the executive, they're just kind of they're trying to advance their career pretty much at any cost, and this kind of becomes somewhat of a power trip. What aspects of the human experience or what kind of needs do you think that being the bully or the executive or the designee, as you alluded to, What aspects of it do you think it speaks to most?
Well, there are clear benefits to being in charge because you get to call the shots and you get to do whatever you please within that social context. I'm not a psychologist or sociologist, but just in my observations of human dynamic, I've noticed that human beings are the only beings on the planet of animals that live in groups that are able to circumvent the hierarchy and the natural order of things. So, we've talked about a pack of wolves, and you have the alpha male and alpha female. And they take charge for separate reasons than a bully would take charge on the playground. The reasons that the alpha male and alpha female in a wolf pack, for example, take charge is for survival of the pack. And so they have a clear-cut understanding, I guess, intuitively, of rights versus responsibility. So it's not only the rights and privileges that come with being in charge, but they also have the tremendous responsibility to keep the pack safe, to uphold pack priority, to make sure that they have territory, to make sure that they have food to eat, to make sure that they're able to fend off competition. And so that is in natural order, and again, not being a psychologist or sociologist, in the natural order of things, pack leadership should care about such things. What happens in the playground is you have basically a loophole and absence of rules, and so similar to crimes of opportunity, these bullies step up, or more dominant character types step up, and what happens is normally leadership should be a matter of character, but in this case, leadership is a matter of personality, and so you may not have the best person in charge actually being in charge.
Absolutely. But it just seems to me, and again, like you said, neither one of us are psychologists, sociologists, even though I happen to work, one of my lines of work is in the field of psychology, but I'm not an actual psychologist per se. But it seems to me it shows how incredibly, in some ways, how incredibly fragile the human psyche is in general in so many ways. I mean, maybe it's oversimplifying it to say, anybody who wants power or anybody who wants to bully others is just insecure. However, maybe that's accurate in and of itself. Is there something that people have that maybe in some cases, of course, you talked about circumventing social order, but or pack priority. But the thing is that I guess you come back to somehow people have a chip on their shoulder or something that drives ambition. And I think that you've seen that. I know several people like that, several people who were bullied in school and then became very, very ambitious later in their professional careers, almost to the point of being, when they spoke about it, they almost came across as arrogant, in my opinion. You take a guy like Michael Jordan, and we talk about the sports references, and all due respect to him and his career, he wasn't as successful as a basketball player in the early stages of high school as he was later. So maybe that feeling of rejection really drove him, or somebody telling him that he wasn't good enough. And then, according to several books that came out later and everything, he was the really I don't know if it's fair to call him the bully, but he was definitely hard on other players. He was very, very hard on his teammates. Was the understanding. So, was there something that maybe transcended from his rejection, or maybe feelings of inadequacy in the earlier days to, hey, I'm going to reach the top, and I'm going to make, my teammates hear about it until they jump on that same train with me, and I'll talk down to them if I need to. It just seems like almost like there's, if we're elaborate, and again, we're not trying to come at it from the angles of psychologists or sociologists. Yet at the same time, I think it's interesting that level of ambition was created within him. In fact, I think that turning him down created that kind of, perhaps that chip on his shoulder, and I'd love to be able to ask him about it personally, that kind of vice or that kind of chip on his shoulder or that kind of thing, like, I'm never going to get rejected again. and people carry that through life sometimes, and I think that he found a new level of ambition. Maybe he wouldn't have been had he been accepted on his high school team, and had he been more successful in those early years, maybe he would have been more complacent, not as driven. I just think that sometimes feeling negative, feeling rejected, sometimes it seems to drive people to action, and sometimes when they're driven to action, they carry a chip on their shoulder. Have you noticed the same thing, or is your take on it a little bit different, would you say?
Well, the case of Michael Jordan, and every organization has this, it would seem that Michael Jordan had the personality, the strong personality, and with that came the desire to get good at what he did. But what Michael Jordan lacked was character, and that's what Phil Jackson brought to the table. And so, without knowing him and speaking to him personally, I don't know what motivated him to mitigate his personality and replace it with character, but whatever it was inside of him made him decide that was the right option. It's interesting to see how even in organizations going to the adult realm, how a lot of their promotions are dictated based off of personality, not character, and that's why you have a lot of organizations that have people being invited to the ranks of leadership that really don't have the character to do it, but they're invited because they're in the candidate pool. They're in the candidate pool because they have the personality. Now, is that a personality that they learned in the playground? I believe that in large measure it is. I don't know the percentage rate of playground bullies that go on to be corporate bullies, but I would assume that, the saying goes, you fight how you train. So if the reward system in their social stratus has led them to believe that that's how you act and that's how they're going to act, and until somebody comes along like a mentor and starts to develop their character, they're going to keep on committing the same social mistakes, even though for them they're not mistakes because they have been rewarded.
Absolutely. And you know what? Something that you just said, and what we're talking about now, just gave me an idea for some homework that I have. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about offhand. There is a website which I haven't been on in a long time, and I'd like to share it. If not this podcast, the next one, because I don't recall the name of it offhand. And this just came into my mind, where people go onto this website and they discuss the experiences they've had with certain companies, and they rate them with everything like quality, the culture, the company culture. This might be a helpful resource to people. Company culture and what kind of experience they had over there, upward mobility, that type of thing. So if you read the testimonies from some of these people, then I think that you'll realize it'll also give you an idea. Because, again, some questions you can ask the employer directly up front, but then you can also look at the testimonials from other people, and I'll be happy to share that website later. But like I said, it just came into my mind, and I forgot the name of it offhand. You wouldn't happen to know the name of it offhand, would you, by any chance, or of a website like that where people share their testimonials in the workplace with specific companies?
So I don't know what you're talking about, but there is a website called Glassdoor.
That's right, Glassdoor. That's the one. That's the one that my brain emptied out on. I apologize, everyone. That's the one. Glassdoor is the one that contains basically what I described. So thank you for filling me in on that. I drew a blank there. And what do you think about that? Have you read some of the testimonials on there? Apparently you're familiar with it. So have you read the testimonials on there, or do you think it gives a pretty good picture, or do you think this leaves out too many areas, maybe some gray areas? What are your thoughts on Glassdoor, I guess, in a nutshell?
Well, I guess the invariables kind of make it a little bit challenging to give face value credit. Now, granted, it is a nice window view in of what goes on inside the organization, but you don't know if the person that is making these posts is a disgruntled employee. There are a lot of people that maybe not be good employees and wanted to get promoted but couldn't, so they're mad. Everyone wants to make more money, but not everyone deserves the opportunity to make more money in their current status. So by that I mean just wanting, for example, to be a champion, like in the case of the Chicago Bulls during their tenure, was not enough. In some cases, even talent was not enough. It wasn't until they understood the dynamic and the character needed and the work ethic needed and team spirit needed that these people deserve to win a championship, so to speak. So I say all that to say, without knowing the character of people that are filling out these testimonials on Glassdoor, it is kind of hard to ascertain the validity. However, I think it is better than nothing. And these days, it is, there's really no excuse to not doing research on a company you're trying to work for. And especially if you know what you're looking for, you're trying to ascertain, does this company run like a playground? Like, are they going to promote based on the right principles? Are they going to give assignments based on the right principles? Are they going to assign off days based on the right principles? Or is it an exclusive society? If you're not with the in crowd, then you're pretty much going to be stuck in whatever position that you got hired into.
Absolutely. And I think that Glassdoor, to your point, I think depending on people's experience there, or if they didn't get what they wanted, maybe they weren't entirely, people are not going to be entirely objective. Because, people don't get what they want, and sometimes they can be pouty. I can say that about yours truly. We had a chuckle the other day. I was telling you about when I used to be more involved in music and that type of thing. Music is still a great passion, deep love of mine, and I'm still involved in it to this day. But when I first started out, and I had a tryout with a band and everything, it didn't work out. But at the same time, I was just starting out on that instrument, and then I became a better musician later, and I ended up collaborating with several of those guys anyway, in a different band. So I didn't make that initial band, and I could have gone ahead and said, oh, yeah, well, this band, I'm saying if there's a Glassdoor for bands, I could have said, oh, yeah, these guys, they went ahead, and they had they had the music notes in a different key, and they didn't properly give me the information to prepare for it and that kind of thing. Truth of the matter is, at that point, I wasn't good enough. I'd only been playing that instrument for a little while, less than 6 months, and I needed to get better. But then eventually, several of those guys I ended up collaborating with later, and we were in a different band, and it worked out. So I think that from that standpoint, hopefully that's a little comic relief. From that standpoint, what ends up happening is that sometimes a person has not earned or put it, like you said, earned or put in the work to get that promotion or to get that job or whatever. If they put in a little bit more work, and then based on that merit and and the exhibition of skill and experience and that type of thing, approachability, and then they get it at a future date, then it's probably for the best, because obviously where they started from and and where they ended up, they put some work in between. And that's part of the human experience, that's part of the professional experience. But again, if somebody's being accepted into a band, somebody's being accepted into, a job or getting a promotion within a company, that's what a lot of this is about. It's got to be for the right reasons. It's got to be merit-based or experience-based. But in a lot of cases, we know you don't get that, and that's why we have the playground rules phenomenon. And that's why we're here and we're doing this podcast, and I'm hoping that people are enjoying, listening to them as much as I'm enjoying participating in them.
Definitely, and I feel the need to classify the statement I made about people not deserving a raise or promotion at whatever stage they may find themselves in. What we're advocating for here is fair judgment. We're not saying that everyone deserves a trophy. We're not saying that if your feelings are hurt that you deserve to be promoted. What we are saying is that if you're putting the work in and you are credentialed up and you're studied up and your work ethic is solid, that you deserve to have fair judgment rendered over your situation. And it is case by case, but the blanket statement being made is that the era in which playground rules prevail and you only get promoted if you're in the in crowd has got to stop. Absolutely.
I completely agree with you. And yeah, it's just, I know myself personally, what I've dealt with in personal and professional situations, especially growing up, I'm tired of life being a popularity contest, and yeah, I'd like to see some real, people getting advantages based on hard work and merits. I don't think that we could ever achieve an absolute ideal, because as human beings, human nature is imperfect. We're imperfect, but at the same time, we could certainly do, in society can do a lot better than we're doing right now, I would say. Bullying is a huge problem, and then, all types of it, probably as bad or as worse than when I was growing up, and then, in professional environments and that type of thing. A lot of people are disgruntled because they feel like it's not a fair playing field. And a lot of people are not happy in their jobs, and including some of that data that you introduced earlier, some great numbers to look at, and yeah, so it's definitely going to turn it around. And we're two people, like you said, with two with opinions, and you've done you yourself done a lot of work with this phenomenon, and written some really good materials, and I think that this will give a great opportunity for people to become well acquainted with the phenomenon, and to go ahead and feel free to drop us a note and that type of thing, question and comments, and we'll be happy to go ahead and discuss it. Maybe they want something kept private, we can go ahead, anonymous person, and discuss situation with them offline, or maybe just hear them out. Maybe they just need to vent, or maybe if they want some suggestions, we'd be willing to provide some. We're all in this together.
Definitely all in this together, yeah. And so I guess going into the segment of final thoughts, so again, it is a gloomy beginning as far as the numbers. One would seem to want to walk away from this of saying there's no hope, there's no chance, why try anyway? And while the biggest challenge is going to be to get organizations to stop conducting the negative practices that they are involved in, I think probably the biggest takeaway is that the job-seeking public become informed of this. The irony is that, you and I are two different people. We have two different opinions, and a lot of times they coincide, or not two different, but two separate opinions. But it's amazing that we have encountered similar injustices in our professional world. And this, I believe, is because of the playground phenomenon that's alive and well, starting in the playground in schools and then permeating into the professional world. So I would encourage all job seekers to, now that you have this clever term handy, to try and develop your own questions that are not accusatory, because you don't want to shut the hiring body down, but at the same time, you want to dig into the underbelly of the place you're trying to work to see if it's a fit. And you're not only a fit if it is the kind of business that you're trying to get into, or if you're qualified, or if your resume is a match, but is their ideology and how they decide to promote people and how they decide to assign people fitting to what you're trying to accomplish in life. That's really, I forget who said it, but something along the lines of, even though you're being interviewed, you can also kind of interview them as well to figure out if you're a good fit, not only in qualifications, but as far as your vision for where you're trying to go in life.
Absolutely, and that's a great luxury to have. That's a great opportunity to have, where somebody is feeling like, hey, you know what, for my next job, I actually have the opportunity to qualify them. They don't have to just take the next job that they get offered because of, whatever it is, financial pressure or whatever. They can actually say, hey, you know what, I actually have the opportunity to go ahead and decide for myself whether or not this company is going to be a good fit for me, not only me being a good fit for them. I think that's extremely empowering, and I think that's a great message to leave our users with. So, yeah, that's what I've got for today, and I look forward to our next show. Not necessarily same time, but same channel, and I look forward to talking to everybody and hearing people's input as well. So we'll talk to you soon, Eric. Thank you.
Have a good day.
You got it. Bye-bye.